My name is Josephine Walker, 32 years old, and I never thought family could feel so much like strangers. When my parents bought their dream home, the celebration invitations went out to everyone except me. "It's for real family," my mother said on the phone, each word slicing deeper than she knew. After years of financial support and endless love, I discovered my place in their hearts had a price tag. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button as I reveal how I finally found my voice. Growing up in the suburbs of Detroit, my childhood was defined by financial struggle. My parents, Thomas and Martha Walker, always seemed to be chasing the next paycheck. Dad worked at the local factory while Mom jumped between retail jobs. We lived in a small two-bedroom rental that constantly needed repairs, and I remember many nights when dinner was whatever we could cobble together from the pantry. Despite our limited means, I was determined to build a better future. I studied relentlessly through high school, earning a full scholarship to the University of Michigan. Even with the scholarship, I worked two part-time jobs to cover my living expenses. Weekdays at the campus library, weekends waiting tables at a local diner. Sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded myself. The hard work paid off when I graduated with a degree in finance and landed an entry-level position at a respected financial firm in Chicago. Those early years were tough, living in a tiny studio apartment and taking public transportation everywhere to save money. But I was building something for myself brick by brick. By 30, I had climbed to a senior financial advisor position, managing portfolios for high net worth clients. My expertise helped others build wealth, and I practiced what I preached, creating a substantial savings and investment portfolio of my own. I purchased a comfortable condo in a good neighborhood and finally felt financially secure. As my career flourished, an unfortunate pattern emerged with my parents. Their financial requests started small, a few $100s here, for an unexpected car repair, another few hundred there for medical bills. I was happy to help, remembering the lean years of my childhood, but the requests grew larger and more frequent, coinciding with my increasing salary. "Josephine, the furnace broke and it will cost $4,000 to replace," Dad called one winter night. "We just don't have it, and the temperatures are dropping below freezing this weekend." Without hesitation, I transferred the money. A month later, Mom needed dental work not covered by insurance. Another $5,000. Then it was roof repairs, property taxes they had fallen behind on, and new appliances when the old ones mysteriously stopped working. The dynamic shifted further when my father remarried after a brief separation from my mother. Though they reconciled, that relationship produced my half-brother Jackson. 7 years younger than me, Jackson became the center of my parents' universe. While I had been expected to support myself through college, my parents somehow found money to help Jackson attend a private university. When he wanted to study abroad in Europe, they called me. "It's such an opportunity for your brother," Mom explained. "We hate to ask, but could you help with his program fees? It's only $8,000. I agreed, though the disparate treatment stung. My achievements always seemed secondary to Jackson's mere existence. At family gatherings, my promotions warranted brief congratulations, while Jackson's C+ average was celebrated extensively. "You were always so independent, Josephine," Mom would say when I occasionally expressed hurt. "Jackson needs more support to find his way." My best friend Amanda witnessed this pattern over years of friendship. We met in college and remained close despite the distance when she stayed in Michigan after graduation. During our weekly phone calls, her frustration grew more evident. "Joey, do you realize you've given them more money this year than you spent on yourself?" she asked after I mentioned covering my parents' property tax bill. "They're taking advantage of your generosity." "They're my parents, Amanda," I'd always respond. "What am I supposed to do? Let them struggle when I have the means to help." Michael, the marketing executive I had been dating for 2 years, shared Amanda's concerns. Kind and perceptive, he noticed how my mood would darken after conversations with my parents. "It's like they have a direct line to your guilt button," he observed one evening after my mother called about another financial emergency. "You deserve to be appreciated, not just used as an ATM." I started seeing Dr. Reynolds, a therapist who specialized in family dynamics, trying to make sense of my conflicting emotions. In her comfortable office with soft lighting and comfortable chairs, I began to recognize the unhealthy patterns. "You're describing a one-way relationship," Dr. Reynolds noted during our third session. "Healthy family relationships involve mutual respect and reciprocity." This clarity was beginning to form when I stumbled across my father's Facebook post one Tuesday evening in April. There he was, standing proudly with my mother in front of a beautiful two-story colonial house, keys in hand. The caption read, "Finally bought our dream home. A new chapter begins for the Walker family." I was genuinely happy for them. The house was beautiful, certainly more impressive than anything they had ever owned before. I immediately called to congratulate them, eager to hear about this major purchase that somehow hadn't been mentioned during our regular conversations. "Mom, I just saw Dad's post. The house is beautiful. When can I come see it?" I asked excitedly. There was an unusual pause before she answered. "Well, Josephine, we're having a housewarming this Saturday, but it's really just for close family." Confused, I laughed lightly. "What do you mean I'm your daughter?" "You know what I mean," she said, her voice taking on that dismissive tone I knew too well. "It's for real family. Jackson and Sarah will be there, and Jackson's in-laws. It's a celebration for people who are actually part of our daily lives." The words hit like a physical blow. I struggled to find my voice as my father took the phone. "Your mother means we're keeping it small," he said, though he made no effort to contradict her statement or extend an invitation. "Maybe you can visit another time when we're settled." I managed to end the call without revealing how deeply I was hurt, but as soon as I hung up, tears came unbidden. Michael found me sitting on our couch, still staring at my phone. "They said it was for real family," I whispered as he sat beside me. "After everything, I'm not real family to them." Michael held me as the full weight of those words sank in. "That's not about you," he said firmly. "That's about them and their warped priorities." The following weekend, my cousin Diane posted photos of the housewarming party. It was far from the small gathering my parents had implied. At least 30 people filled the spacious new house, including extended family members, neighbors, and friends. The elaborate spread of catered food and decorated rooms suggested significant expense. Jackson and his wife Sarah featured prominently in the photos, often standing between my parents, with their arms around each other. The four of them looked like a complete family unit with no space or need for anyone else. I recognized aunts, uncles, and cousins. I'd grown up with people I still exchanged holiday cards with. None had mentioned the event to me, presumably assuming I had declined to attend. Only my Aunt Grace, my mother's sister, reached out the day after. "I missed seeing you yesterday," she said when she called. "Your mother said you were too busy with work to come." The lie stung almost as much as the exclusion. "I wasn't invited, Aunt Grace," I admitted. "Mom said it was for real family only." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "That doesn't sound right," she finally said. "You are her only daughter." In my next session with Dr. Reynolds, I struggled to make sense of the situation. "Maybe they're right," I said, staring at my hands. "I'm not around much. I live in a different city. Jackson sees them every week." "Josephine," Dr. Reynolds said gently, "geographic distance doesn't determine family bonds. You've maintained consistent contact and provided substantial support. This isn't about your behavior, but about their expectations and values." Amanda was less measured in her response when we spoke. "That's it," she declared. "You need to cut them off financially and emotionally. They don't deserve another cent of your money or minute of your time." While I wasn't ready for such a drastic step, I did decide to take some space. For the first time in years, I let my parents' weekly calls go to voicemail. I stopped checking in daily via text. I focused instead on my work, my relationship with Michael, and sessions with Dr. Reynolds. 3 weeks of relative silence passed before my parents reached out again. I expected perhaps an apology, or at least acknowledgement of the hurt they had caused. Instead, the message from my father was about money. The history of my financial support for my parents runs deep, far deeper than I had allowed myself to acknowledge. Looking back now, I can trace a clear pattern that began with my first professional job and escalated with each promotion and salary increase. The first major expense I covered was my father's emergency gallbladder surgery when I was 24. Their insurance had a $5,000 deductible they couldn't afford. I had just received my first bonus and emptied most of my savings to help. My parents were tearfully grateful, promising to repay me when they could. That repayment never materialized. nor was it mentioned again. Next came their car accident when I was 26. No one was hurt, thankfully, but their vehicle was totaled and the insurance payout wasn't enough for a reliable replacement. I provided $12,000 for a decent used SUV, telling myself it was an investment in their safety. As the years passed, the requests became more routine, but no less expensive. Home repairs, medical bills, property taxes, insurance, premiums, and countless temporary loans to get them through tight months. Each request came wrapped in the language of family obligation. "That's what family does," Mom would say. "We raised you, and now you're in a position to give back." Dad preferred a different approach. "We're not getting any younger, Josephine. Someday all this worry about money will be behind us, but until then, we need to stick together." What struck me most as I began to analyze these patterns was how they never acknowledged these contributions to anyone else. At family gatherings, they would complain about financial struggles, never mentioning that their daughter had just covered a major expense. When relatives commented on their new car or home improvements, they would vaguely reference careful saving rather than my financial assistance. The contrast with how they treated Jackson was stark. My half-brother had never held a stable job, bouncing between startup ventures that invariably failed within months. Yet his financial irresponsibility was always framed as entrepreneurial spirit, or finding his path. When he needed money, which was often my parents would either provide it themselves or shield him from consequences. "Your brother isn't as fortunate as you are," Mom would explain when I questioned this disparity. "He doesn't have your head for money, or your opportunities." These opportunities were ones I had created through years of hard work and sacrifice, facts that seemed conveniently forgotten. A month after the housewarming party, I hadn't been invited to my father's text arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was preparing for a client meeting. "Josephine, the new house needs some renovations we didn't anticipate. The kitchen appliances all need upgrading, and there's an issue with the master bathroom plumbing. Looking at about $15,000 total. Can you transfer the money this week? Thanks in advance." No greeting, no inquiry about my well-being, and certainly no acknowledgement of our recent distance. Just an expectation that I would comply as I always had. I stared at the message, a strange numbness replacing my usual automatic response to reach for my banking app. $15,000. For renovations on a house I wasn't welcome to visit because I wasn't real family. I showed the message to Michael that evening over dinner. His expression hardened as he read it. "They haven't spoken to you in a month, excluded you from their housewarming, and now they just expect $15,000. He shook his head in disbelief. "Joey, this has gone beyond taking advantage. This is exploitation." I couldn't deny the truth in his words. "I know, but they're still my parents." "Parents who said you're not real family," he reminded me gently. "You can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep them warm, especially when they won't even acknowledge the sacrifice." When Amanda called later that week for our regular chat, I mentioned the request. Her reaction was immediate and vehement. "Absolutely not. Are you kidding me? They exclude you from their house party and then want you to renovate the place. Hell no." Her outrage validated my own growing anger. "I've been thinking about exactly how much I've given them over the years," I admitted. "I'm meeting with my financial advisor tomorrow to go through the numbers." The meeting with Susan, my personal financial advisor, was illuminating and sobering. Together, we combed through years of bank statements, categorizing each transfer to my parents. "Based on these records," Susan said, gesturing to the spreadsheet on her screen, "you've provided your parents with approximately $108,000 over the past 8 years. The number was staggering. More than $100,000, not including smaller cash gifts and expenses, I had covered directly. "If this money had remained in your investment accounts," Susan continued, "given market performance, you'd have approximately $145,000 more in your portfolio today." I felt lightheaded. That amount could have been a down payment on a house of my own, rather than renting my condo. It could have funded a year sabbatical to travel, something I had always dreamed of doing. It could have been security for my own future. "The concerning part," Susan added, "is how these transfers have increased in frequency and amount. If this pattern continues, it could seriously impact your retirement planning and financial goals." That same evening, Aunt Grace called, her voice unusually hesitant. Josephine, I need to tell you something that might be difficult to hear, she began. I've been at your parents' house helping them arrange some furniture, and I overheard something troubling. According to Aunt Grace, my parents had been telling extended family that their new house and recent lifestyle improvements were due to smart investments my father had made years ago that were finally paying off. There had been no mention of my contributions. I knew you had helped them occasionally, Aunt Grace said. But from what I gathered, you've been supporting them substantially. Is that true? When I confirmed the extent of my financial assistance, her sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. That's not right, Josephine. They've been living beyond their means on your dime while taking credit for financial savvy. And after excluding you from their housewarming, that's not just ungrateful, it's cruel. As I processed this conversation reviewing years of one-sided giving, my resentment crystallized into a firm resolve. I would no longer enable this unhealthy dynamic, regardless of family ties. I didn't respond to my father's text, nor to the 3 follow-up messages that came over the next several days, each more insistent than the last. Instead, I focused on my work, my relationship, and my own financial planning, finding surprising relief in the silence. That silence was shattered on a Saturday morning when my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway, their expressions a calculated mix of concern and irritation. I hesitated before opening the door, taking a deep breath to center myself. When I finally turned the handle, my parents pushed their way in without waiting for an invitation, as if they had every right to my space. "Josephine, what's going on?" My father demanded, his tone already combative. "We've been trying to reach you for days." My mother looked around my apartment with that familiar expression of faint disapproval. "You could at least respond to our messages," she added. "We were worried." I gestured to the living room, maintaining a composure that felt surprisingly natural. "Please sit down. Would you like some water or coffee?" They declined refreshments, remaining standing as if to emphasize the temporary nature of their visit. My mother crossed her arms over her chest. "Is this about the housewarming?" she asked abruptly. "Are you still upset about that?" It was just easier not to have to explain our complicated family situation to Jackson's in-laws. The casual dismissal of my feelings was so familiar, it almost made me laugh. "Our complicated family situation, I'm your daughter." "You know what I mean," my mother said with a wave of her hand. "Jackson and Sarah are starting their family soon. It's important they have a good relationship with his in-laws. We needed to focus on them." My father interjected, clearly impatient with this line of conversation. "Look, Josephine, we didn't come here to rehash all that. We need an answer about the renovation money. The contractors are waiting to start, and we've already picked out the appliances." "The high-end Viking range is on hold for us," my mother added, as if this detail would somehow motivate me. "But they can only hold it until Monday." I took a seat in my armchair, gesturing again for them to sit. This time they did, perching on the edge of my couch like visitors who had no intention of staying. "Before we discuss that," I said carefully, "I think we need to talk about our overall financial relationship." My father frowned. "What do you mean, financial relationship? You're our daughter. Family helps family." "When one can," my mother added, "and you're doing very well for yourself." "I have been fortunate in my career," I agreed. "And I've been happy to help when you needed it. But I need to understand something. When you bought this new house, where did the down payment come from?" They exchanged a quick glance, a silent communication that excluded me. "We had some savings," my father said vaguely. "And the monthly mortgage payments, the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance. How are those being covered?" My mother straightened her back. "Thomas has his pension, and I still do my part-time bookkeeping. We manage." "The way you managed before I started helping?" I asked quietly. "Because by my calculations, I've given you over $100,000 in the past 8 years." The number hung in the air between us. My father's expression hardened, while my mother's eyes widened briefly before narrowing. "So you've been keeping score?" my father said, his voice rising. "After everything we did for you." "We raised you," my mother added. "We sacrificed everything for your education, your opportunities." "I earned a full scholarship to college," I reminded them. "I worked 2 jobs to cover my living expenses. What exactly did you sacrifice for my education? This direct challenge to their narrative visibly startled them. We gave you a home, my mother exclaimed. We fed and clothed you, which is what parents are supposed to do for their children, I replied calmly. It's not a transaction that obligates me to fund your lifestyle indefinitely. My father leaned forward, his expression darkening. Is this how you talk to your investment clients, calculating what they owe you? My clients pay for my professional services, I explained, maintaining my composure. Our arrangement has been entirely different. I've given freely without expectation of repayment, but I'm starting to realize there's been an expectation of entitlement to my earnings. Entitlement? My mother repeated, incredulous. Is it entitlement to expect a child to care for her parents? Jackson understands family obligation. He visits every week, helps around the house. Has Jackson ever given you $15,000 for renovations? I interrupted. Has he paid for your car, your medical bills, your property taxes? The silence answered my question. I thought not, I continued. Yet he's real family and I'm not. You're twisting my words, my mother protested, though her eyes slid away from mine. You know what I meant. I do know what you meant, I agreed. You meant that despite everything I've done, everything I've given him still on the periphery of this family. A useful resource, but not an essential member. My father stood abruptly. We're not going to sit here and be insulted in this way. Either you're going to help with the renovations or you're not. I remained seated, looking up at him steadily. I'm not. The simple words carried a weight that seemed to physically push him back. You're not, he repeated. I'm not giving you $15,000 for renovations on a house I wasn't welcome to visit. I'm not continuing to fund a lifestyle that excludes me. I'm not enabling a relationship that's become entirely one-sided. My mother's face flushed with anger. After everything we've done for you, I carried you for 9 months. I was in labor for 16 hours. We drove you to dance classes and helped with your science projects and sat through your boring piano recitals. You were parents, I said simply. Those things aren't exceptional, they're expected. Just as it's expected that adult children will help aging parents who truly need assistance. But that's not what's happening here. You're not in financial crisis. You're choosing expensive renovations on a house you likely can't afford. My father switched tactics, his voice softening as he sat back down. Josephine, sweetie, you know we appreciate everything you've done for us. We might not say it enough, but we do. And this renovation, it's not just for us. It'll increase the house value. Someday that house will be yours and Jackson's. The transparent manipulation might have worked months earlier, but now I saw through it clearly. Dad, be honest. That house will go to Jackson, just like everything else. Now you're just being childish and jealous, my mother snapped. Jackson needs more support. He's still finding his way. He's 35, I pointed out. How much longer does he need to find his way? And why is it my responsibility to fund that journey? They had no answer to this, so my father tried yet another approach. Look, if you're still upset about the housewarming, we apologize. It was insensitive. Why don't you come over next weekend? You can see the house, give your input on the renovations. The belated invitation, offered only when they needed money, crystallized everything wrong with our relationship. I'm not upset about a party, I said. I'm concerned about a pattern that's been going on for years. I've been treated like an ATM rather than a daughter. That's ridiculous, my mother exclaimed. You're being overly sensitive. I'm being realistic, I corrected her. And I'm making a decision that's long overdue. I'm not giving you the money for renovations. In fact, I'm not giving you any more money at all unless there's a genuine emergency. The shock on their faces would have been almost comical if the situation weren't so painful. You can't be serious, my father said. I'm entirely serious, I replied. I love you both, but this relationship needs to change. It's not healthy for any of us. My mother stood gathering her purse with shaking hands. If that's how you feel, then perhaps we shouldn't bother you anymore. Come on, Thomas. My father hesitated, seemingly unable to believe I wasn't backing down. Josephine, think about what you're doing. Family is forever. You don't want to damage that relationship. I met his gaze steadily. A relationship goes both ways, Dad. I've been doing all the giving with very little in return. That's not a relationship I want to preserve. So it's all about what you get back, he demanded, anger returning to his voice. What happened to giving without expectation? Giving without expectation doesn't mean accepting exploitation without boundaries, I replied. I want a relationship based on mutual respect and love, not financial obligation. My mother had reached the door, but turned back with one last barb. When you need us someday, Josephine, remember this moment. Remember how you turned your back on family. I'm not turning my back on anyone, I said quietly. I'm simply asking to be treated with the same respect and consideration I've shown you. They left without another word, the door closing behind them with a finality that echoed in my chest. I sat alone in my living room, tears finally coming as the adrenaline faded. But beneath the sadness was something unexpected, a sense of lightness, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. I had finally said no, and though the immediate pain was intense, I knew with absolute certainty it had been the right decision. The days following that confrontation were both challenging and strangely liberating. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my parents, each taking a different approach to regain control of the situation, and more importantly, access to my finances. My father's texts oscillated between guilt trips and anger. After all these years, this is how you repay our sacrifices. One message read, "The next day, your selfishness is disappointing. We raised you better than this." My mother preferred voicemails, her voice wavering between tearful pleas and thinly veiled threats. "Josephine, please call us. We can work this out," she would begin, before inevitably adding, "The family is asking why you're being so difficult. Is that really how you want people to see you?" I didn't respond to any of these attempts following Dr. Reynolds' advice to give myself space to process my emotions before engaging again. That space became even more necessary when Jackson called 3 days after my parents' visit. "Joey, what the hell is going on?" he demanded without preamble. "Mom and Dad are upset, saying you refused to help them with essential house repairs." I noted the immediate reframing of luxury renovations as essential repairs, a manipulation tactic I now recognize clearly. They wanted $15,000 for a Viking range and bathroom upgrades, I replied calmly. In a house I wasn't welcome to visit because, according to Mom, I'm not real family. Jackson paused, clearly not having heard this part of the story. "Look, Mom sometimes says things she doesn't mean when she's stressed. You know how she is." "I do know how she is," I agreed. "And I know how this pattern works. They need money, they reach out, I give it, and then I'm forgotten until the next financial need arises." "That's not fair," Jackson protested. "They're getting older. They need our support." "I've supported them with over $100,000 in 8 years, I said. "How much have you contributed financially, Jackson?" His uncomfortable silence spoke volumes. "They promised Sarah's parents would host Thanksgiving this year," he finally said. "They were counting on having the renovations done by then. It's important to make a good impression." So there it was. The renovations weren't about necessary repairs, but about impressing Jackson's in-laws. The pieces clicked into place with painful clarity. "I'm sorry if this complicates your plans," I said, not feeling particularly sorry at all. "But my decision stands. I'm happy to have a relationship with Mom and Dad that isn't centered around financial support." "You know they can't afford those renovations without your help," he pressed. "Then perhaps they shouldn't have committed to renovations they can't afford," I responded. "Just as they shouldn't have bought a house beyond their means." Jackson scoffed. "Easy for you to say from your fancy Chicago apartment with your big finance job." "Everything I have I earned through hard work and careful financial planning," I said, a hint of anger finally breaking through my composure. "No one handed it to me, and I don't owe it to anyone else, not even family." He hung up without another word. Later that day, I received an unexpected call from Aunt Grace. "Josephine, I wanted you to know I'm on your side in all this," she said without preamble. "Your mother has been calling everyone, telling quite a story about how you've abandoned them in their time of need." I sighed, unsurprised, but still hurt. "What's the official version she's sharing?" "According to Martha, you suddenly cut them off without explanation after years of them supporting your career and helping you through tough times." Aunt Grace said, the eye roll evident in her voice. She conveniently left out the housewarming incident and all the money you've given them over the years. I expected as much, I admitted. She's never been one to take responsibility. Most people are buying it, Aunt Grace continued, but a few of us have noticed the pattern. Your mother has always had a selective relationship with the truth, especially when it comes to financial matters. Over the next week, messages trickled in from various family members. Some were accusatory, clearly having heard only my parents' version of events. My cousin Timothy texted, "Family should come first. Disappointed in you." My uncle James left a voicemail suggesting I remember my roots and not let money come between blood. These messages stung, but they were balanced by others who seemed to sense there was more to the story. My cousin Diane, who had posted the housewarming photos, reached out with genuine concern. "Joey, is everything okay? Aunt Martha is saying some things that don't sound like you at all. I'd rather hear your side before jumping to conclusions." When I explained the situation, including the real family comment and the years of financial support, Diane was shocked. "They excluded you from the housewarming after you've done so much. That's horrible. No wonder you've put your foot down." The monthly family dinner I normally skipped due to distance took place the following weekend. Though I wasn't present, Aunt Grace called me afterward with an update. "Your mother was in rare form," she reported. "According to her, you've had some kind of breakdown brought on by job stress and have irrationally cut off all contact. She had your grandmother in tears, worried about your mental health." I pressed my fingers against my temples, fighting a headache. "And people believe that?" "Some did," Aunt Grace acknowledged. "But others are starting to question things. Your father slipped up at one point mentioning the Viking range they had to cancel. Uncle Frank pointed out that if they can't afford a luxury appliance without your help, perhaps they should have chosen a more modest house to begin with." This led to another revelation. Uncle Frank called me directly the next day, his gruff voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Josephine, I've been meaning to tell you something for a while," he said. "Last Christmas, your parents approached me for a loan for their house down payment. I declined because, frankly, the numbers they showed me didn't add up. Their income couldn't support the mortgage they were considering." I hadn't known about this attempted loan, but it fit the pattern. "What happened after you turned them down?" "A month later, they announced they'd bought the house anyway. When I asked how they managed it, your father said their financial advisor had helped them restructure some investments." Uncle Frank paused. "I take it that financial advisor was actually you." "I gave them $20,000 in January," I confirmed. "They said it was to pay off credit card debt. I had no idea they were using it for a house down payment." Uncle Frank whistled low. "They've been playing a shell game with family members for years, borrowing from one to pay back another. Looks like you've been their most reliable source." Amanda helped me craft responses to family members who had reached out with criticism or concern. "Keep it simple and factual," she advised as we sat in my living room drafting messages. "No need to reveal exactly how much you've given them, but make it clear there's been a pattern of financial support that's become unhealthy." Michael provided unwavering support, never saying, "I told you so," despite having warned me about this dynamic for years. His perspective as someone who grew up in a healthy family with clear boundaries helped me recognize how abnormal my situation had been. "In my family, parents and adult children help each other when there's genuine need," he explained over dinner one night. "But there's never an expectation or entitlement, and financial help certainly isn't a substitute for emotional connection." My grandmother, who had initially been distraught by my mother's dramatic retelling, called me directly. Her voice, frailer than I remembered, still carried the no-nonsense tone that had kept our extended family in line for decades. "Josephine, I need to hear the truth from you," she said. "What's this about you refusing to help your parents?" I explained the situation as clearly and objectively as I could, including the exclusion from the housewarming and the years of financial support it provided. "I see," she said, when I finished the two simple words heavy with understanding. "Martha has always had a gift for reshaping reality to suit her needs. Your grandfather and I enabled it for too long." She paused, then added, "I'm sorry we didn't teach her better for your sake." That simple acknowledgement from my grandmother, the family matriarch, helped validate my decision in a way nothing else had. After 2 weeks of processing and individual conversations, I decided to address the situation directly with the extended family. I composed a single clear email explaining my position and sent it to everyone. I want to clarify recent events to prevent further misunderstandings, I wrote. For years, I've happily provided financial support to my parents when they expressed need. Recently, I made the difficult decision to establish boundaries in that support after being told I wasn't real family and being excluded from their housewarming celebration. I still love my parents and hope for a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. I appreciate your understanding and respect for my privacy as we work through this family matter. The response was mixed, but ultimately positive. Some family members continued to side with my parents, viewing adult children as perpetual resources for their parents, regardless of circumstances. But others reached out with messages of support and understanding, some even sharing similar experiences. Most surprisingly, cousins I had never been particularly close with began to connect more frequently, creating unexpected alliances within the family. My cousin Jennifer invited me to her daughter's graduation party, an event I might normally have skipped. My Aunt Elizabeth's birthday celebration became an opportunity to strengthen these new connections. As the summer approached, bringing with it the first holiday season that would likely not include my parents, I began to understand that family could be redefined on my own terms. 6 months after that definitive confrontation in my apartment, the changes in my life were both subtle and profound. The most immediate difference was in my stress levels. Without the constant anxiety of wondering when the next financial request would come, I slept better and found myself more focused at work. My parents hadn't given up entirely, though their approaches had evolved. The angry demands had gradually transformed into more sophisticated manipulation attempts. "Your father isn't feeling well," my mother texted in June. "Nothing serious, just his blood pressure. He misses you." No direct request for money accompanied this message, but the implication hung unspoken, a hook waiting for me to bite. Dr. Reynolds had been instrumental in helping me establish and maintain healthy boundaries. "Notice how they never simply ask how you're doing or express interest in your life," she pointed out during one session. "Each contact is designed to elicit guilt or obligation." With her guidance, I developed a response strategy that was neither cruel nor enabling. To messages like my mother's about my father's health, I would reply with genuine concern, but no financial offer. "I'm sorry to hear Dad isn't feeling well. Has his doctor adjusted his medication? Please give him my love." These responses were typically met with silence or deflection, revealing the true purpose behind the initial outreach. The money ID previously directed toward my parents' needs was now allocated to my own future. Some went into my retirement accounts, some into a travel fund, and a significant portion into savings for a down payment on a house of my own. In July, Michael and I took a 2-week trip to Portugal, something I'd dreamed of doing for years, but had always postponed, usually after an unexpected financial request from my parents. Walking through the historic streets of Lisbon, sampling port wine in the Douro Valley, and watching sunsets over the Atlantic, I felt a freedom I hadn't experienced in my adult life. "You're different on this trip," Michael observed as we sat at a small cafe in Porto. "More relaxed, more present. I like seeing you this way." He was right. Without my phone constantly pinging with family emergencies and financial demands, I was fully immersed in our experiences together. Our relationship deepened as a result, conversations turning toward a shared future rather than the family drama that had previously consumed so much of our time together. Back in Chicago, I reconnected with my cousin Diane, who had moved to the city for a job opportunity. Over dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant, she shared her own complicated feelings about our family dynamics. "I always admired how you escaped and built your own life," she admitted, twirling pasta around her fork. "The rest of us got caught in the orbit of family expectations and never quite broke free." It wasn't a clean escape, I acknowledged. I carried those expectations with me for years, just expressed through financial support rather than daily presence. Diane nodded. "The family system doesn't like it when someone changes the rules. What you're doing takes real courage." Together, we began forming new traditions to replace the family gatherings I would likely miss. Diane introduced me to her friend group, a diverse collection of transplants to Chicago who had created their own chosen family. Amanda visited more frequently from Michigan, and Michael's warm, functional family welcomed me with increasing affection. My professional life flourished as well, the mental energy previously consumed by family drama, now channeled into creative solutions for clients. I received a significant promotion in August, becoming the youngest partner in my firm's history. The announcement of my promotion on LinkedIn brought congratulations from colleagues and clients, but silence from my parents. When Aunt Grace mentioned it to them at a family dinner, my mother reportedly replied, "Well, she always did prioritize work over family." In September, I took a significant step in my personal life, purchasing a charming 3-bedroom house in a leafy Chicago neighborhood. The down payment came partially from the money I had saved by not responding to my parents' financial requests over the previous 6 months. "It's perfect," Amanda declared as she helped me move in, admiring the original hardwood floors and large windows. "This is exactly the home you've always described wanting." The process of furnishing and decorating my new home became a joy rather than a stress. Without the financial drain of supporting my parents, I could invest in quality pieces that would last for years. The home became a physical manifestation of my new boundaries, a space that was entirely mine, designed for my comfort and happiness, rather than to meet others' expectations. In early October, I decided to host a small housewarming gathering. I invited close friends, colleagues. I had grown close to my cousin Diane and her friends, and a few select family members who had shown support during the difficult months of transition. I hesitated over whether to invite my parents, eventually deciding to extend an olive branch. The invitation I sent was warm but clear about boundaries. "I'd love to welcome you to my new home and begin rebuilding our relationship on new terms." My mother's response was predictably dismissive. "We're quite busy with our own home projects these days since we've had to scale back without your help. Perhaps another time." The rejection stung less than I expected, affirming that I had made the right decision in establishing boundaries. My small housewarming was nothing like my parents' elaborate event. There was no catered food, just potluck dishes brought by friends who knew my favorites. No formal decorations, just the warm, personal touches I'd added to my new home. No pressure to impress, just genuine connection with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. 2 days after my housewarming, my father called directly for the first time in months. The urgency in his voice sent a familiar spike of anxiety through me before I could center myself. "Josephine, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency," he began, dispensing with any greeting. "Your mother needs surgery, her gallbladder. The insurance won't cover all of it, and we're looking at $8,000 out of pocket. I know things have been strained, but this is serious." The old me would have immediately transferred the money, no questions asked. The new me took a deep breath and responded calmly. "I'm sorry to hear about Mom's health issues. That sounds scary. When is the surgery scheduled?" His hesitation was telling. "Well, we're still consulting with doctors about the best approach." "I understand," I said. "Once you have a confirmed diagnosis and treatment plan from her doctor, I'd be happy to discuss how I might help. Maybe I could speak directly with her physician to understand the situation better." "That's not necessary," my father replied quickly. "We'll figure something out." No further mention was made of the supposed emergency surgery. When I mentioned the call to Aunt Grace, she confirmed my suspicions. "Your mother had some indigestion after eating fried food. The doctor suggested she cut back on fatty meals and come back if symptoms persist." There was no mention of surgery or gallbladder issues. The transparent attempt to manipulate me back into financial support should have angered me, but instead, I felt a profound sadness mixed with clarity. They weren't interested in rebuilding our relationship. They were interested in rebuilding their access to my resources. When I called them back to offer emotional support through what I now knew was a minor health issue, their response was telling. "Unless you're calling about the medical bills, we don't have much to discuss," my mother said curtly before hanging up. That final interaction confirmed what I had been slowly accepting over the past months. Some relationships cannot be saved, at least not in the form we might hope for. The parents I wanted, who would love me unconditionally and value me as a daughter, rather than a financial resource, didn't exist. The parents I had were unlikely to change patterns established over decades. With that painful but liberating realization, I turned my focus fully to building the life and relationships that nourished, rather than depleted me. 1 year after that pivotal moment when I finally said no to my parents, I stood in the backyard of my Chicago home, surrounded by people who had become my chosen family. The autumn air carried the scent of the apple cider simmering on my stove inside, and colorful leaves from the maple tree overhead occasionally drifted down to join our celebration. To Josephine, Michael said, raising his glass in a toast, who taught me what true courage looks like. The small gathering of friends and supportive family members echoed the toast, their genuine warmth wrapping around me like a protective blanket. Amanda had flown in from Michigan, as had my grandmother, now frailer, but still sharp-minded at 88. Aunt Grace and Uncle Frank sat beside my cousin Diane and her husband. Colleagues who had become friends mingled with neighbors who had welcomed me warmly to the community. Notably absent were my parents and Jackson. The house they had purchased, the one I wasn't welcome to visit, because it was for real family, had proven unsustainable without my financial support. 3 months earlier, Aunt Grace had informed me they had sold it, downsizing to a condominium more aligned with their actual resources. They blamed the housing market, the economy, everything but their own choices, she had reported during one of our weekly phone calls. Your name wasn't mentioned, but everyone understood the situation. The most surprising development had come 2 months ago when Jackson called unexpectedly. His voice, lacking its usual confidence, had caught me off guard. Joey, I owe you an apology, he had begun. I didn't understand what was happening with Mom and Dad until recently. They asked Sarah and me for money for property taxes, then got angry when we could only offer a small amount. They said we were selfish and ungrateful, that family should help family. He paused. It sounded familiar. The conversation that followed revealed how Jackson had begun to experience the same treatment I'd endured for years, now that I was no longer the primary financial resource. It was a painful awakening for him, but one that created an unexpected bridge between us. He wasn't at my gathering, still working through his own complex feelings about our parents, but we'd begun rebuilding a relationship independent of their influence. Small steps, text messages, occasional calls, a tentative foundation for what might become a genuine sibling bond. Through therapy with Dr. Reynolds, I had worked through layers of guilt, obligation, and unmet needs. Family systems resist change, Shed explained in one pivotal session. When you altered your role as the provider, the entire system had to reorganize. The discomfort and pushback you experienced was the system fighting to maintain its familiar pattern, not a reflection of your worth or decisions. This framework helped me understand that my worth had never been tied to what I could provide financially. That realization, simple yet profound, had transformed how I approached all my relationships, not just with family. My relationship with Michael had deepened significantly, our connection strengthened by navigating these challenges together. The small velvet box hidden in his jacket pocket today, which he thought I didn't know about, suggested we were moving toward a new chapter together. On the professional front, I'd channeled my experiences into meaningful action. The financial abuse I'd experienced wasn't uncommon, and my firm now offered specialized workshops on setting financial boundaries within families. Twice monthly, I volunteered at a community center, helping young professionals understand healthy financial relationships. My grandmother, who had initially struggled to understand my position, had become one of my strongest advocates. After witnessing my parents' behavior firsthand, when they approached her for money following my refusal, she had gained painful clarity about patterns she'd previously overlooked. I enabled your mother her entire life, Shed confessed during a visit. I thought I was being a good parent, but I was actually preventing her from developing responsibility. I'm sorry that burden fell to you to correct. The journey hadn't been without pain. There were still nights when I lay awake mourning the parents I wished I had and the relationship that might have been. Holidays carried a particular sting, empty spaces at the table that couldn't quite be filled by even the most loving chosen family. But those moments of grief were balanced by a profound sense of peace I had never known before. My home, purchased with money that would have otherwise disappeared into my parents' endless needs, had become a true sanctuary. My relationships, built on mutual respect rather than obligation, nourished rather than depleted me. My future, no longer mortgaged to support unsustainable expectations, stretched before me with possibilities I was only beginning to explore. As the celebration continued around me, Michael squeezed my hand, drawing me back to the present moment. "Penny for your thoughts," he asked quietly. "I'm thinking about worth," I replied. "How we measure it, how we recognize it in ourselves." He nodded understanding as he always did. "And what have you concluded?" "That my worth was never about what I could provide," I said. "It was always about who I am even when I couldn't see it." The hardest no I had ever spoken had led to the most important yes to myself. That boundary, painful as it was to establish, had created space for authentic connections based on mutual respect and genuine care. My door remained open for reconciliation with my parents, should they ever recognize me as a daughter, rather than a resource. That hope, fragile but persistent, remained. But I no longer waited by that door, putting my life on hold for a recognition that might never come. Instead, I lived fully in the life I had built, surrounded by people who saw and valued the real me, not just what I could provide them. That I had learned was the true definition of family. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? What helped you stay strong when they pushed back? Share your experience in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and worth. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the most important relationship to repair is the one with yourself.